The day I signed those mortgage papers was one of the proudest moments of my life. My name is Carol, and at 45 years old, I finally had my own house after years of apartment living and saving every penny I could from my advertising manager position. After my divorce 15 years ago, I'd thrown myself into my career, building a stable life, but missing that sense of truly belonging somewhere. That little two-story house with a small backyard represented more than just a real estate purchase. It was freedom from my parents' constant criticism and my sister Jessica's never-ending drama. But the real cherry on top was what I did the very next weekend. I adopted Max, a 7-year-old golden retriever with soulful brown eyes that seemed to hold years of stories behind them. The shelter volunteer explained he'd been abandoned by his previous family when they decided a dog was too much trouble after the kids grew older. Something in his cautious gaze connected with me instantly, like we both understood what it meant to be cast aside. My parents had always shut down my pleas for a dog with the same excuse. Dogs are dirty, they smell, and they ruin furniture. No matter how much I begged or promised to take care of everything myself, the answer was always a firm no. So instead, I channeled my love for animals into volunteering, spending every Saturday throughout high school and college walking dogs and cleaning kennels at the local shelter. Now, watching Max explore my new house, his new home, I felt a sense of completion I'd never experienced before. He sniffed every corner, his tail wagging tentatively as he investigated his surroundings. I could see the hesitation in his movements, the way he would glance back at me as if asking permission, the lingering effects of being abandoned by the family he trusted. "This is your home now, buddy," I whispered, my voice catching slightly. "No one's ever going to leave you again." Within days, we settled into a routine. Morning walks before I headed to the advertising agency, evening training sessions, and weekend adventures at the dog park. I enrolled him in professional training classes right away, not because he was badly behaved, but because I wanted to give him the best life possible and help him overcome his anxieties. "You've got yourself a special one here," his trainer, Jim, told me after the first session. "Smart and eager to please, but you can see the trust issues. He's watching you constantly, making sure you're not going to disappear." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Jim patted my shoulder reassuringly. "Don't worry, with consistency and patience, he'll learn to feel secure again." I beamed with pride when Max mastered each new command, watching his confidence grow week by week. "Yeah, he's pretty amazing," I replied, feeling like I'd found something I'd been missing all my life. 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after bringing Max home, I decided it was time to introduce him to my family. I was nervous but hopeful that they'd see how well behaved and loving he was. Maybe they'd even understand why I'd wanted a dog all these years. The entire drive to my parents' suburban home, I rehearsed what I'd say, how I'd present my new companion in the best possible light. "They're going to love you," I told Max, who sat calmly in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed on me with that unwavering attention he always showed. Or at least, they'll be polite about it. Even as I said it, doubt crept into my mind. The moment I walked through my parents' front door with Max on his leash, I knew it was a mistake. My mom's face scrunched up like she'd smelled something rotten. My dad crossed his arms defensively, and Jessica, my 38-year-old sister who still lived at home, rolled her eyes dramatically. "You actually brought it inside?" Mom said, stepping back as if Max might attack her designer shoes at any moment. At 70, Catherine still dressed impeccably, her silver hair perfectly styled, her house a monument to order and cleanliness. "His name is Max, and yes, I brought him inside." "It's February and freezing outside," I replied, trying to keep my tone light despite the immediate tension. I could feel my shoulders tightening, that familiar childhood feeling of never quite measuring up washing over me. Dad glanced at Max, who was sitting perfectly at my side just like we practiced. "Well, don't let it on the furniture. Your mother just had the couches cleaned." Thomas, my 73-year-old father, had been a high school principal before retirement, and he still spoke with that authoritative tone that brooked no argument. "He won't. He's very well trained," I said, giving Max a gentle pat. He looked up at me with those trusting eyes, completely unaware of the cold reception he was receiving. A surge of protectiveness rose in my chest. We moved to the kitchen where Mom had prepared lunch. Max laid quietly under the table near my feet as we ate, not making a sound, exactly as I'd hoped he would behave. So, Jessica, Mom started, her voice immediately warming. Tell Carol about your job interview. Jessica straightened up, her face brightening. Yeah, this marketing firm practically guaranteed I'll get it. Just a couple more interviews and I'll finally be able to afford my own place. A place where I can live however I want without constantly having to check with Mom and Dad about everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. At 38, she complained about our parents' control while still living under their roof and following their rules. I bit my tongue, remembering all the jobs she'd been guaranteed over the years, all the plans that somehow never materialized. Well, we're very proud of you, Dad said, beaming at her. Then, as if remembering I was there too, he added, Carol's doing well with her mortgage payments, right? That little house must be stretching your budget. I forced a smile. Actually, I'm right on track with my financial plan. The promotion I got last year has helped quite a bit. 20 years at the same firm, working my way up from junior copywriter to department manager, and still he made it sound like I was barely scraping by. Before I could elaborate, I felt Max shift under the table. Jessica let out a dramatic yelp. It touched me. Get it away, she shrieked, pushing her chair back with such force it nearly toppled over. He just wanted to say hello, I explained gently, guiding Max back to my side. He's friendly, Jessica. He wouldn't hurt a fly. Mom shook her head firmly. Carol, I think it's best if you don't bring the dog when you visit in the future. Your sister's clearly uncomfortable, and frankly, so are we. At your age, I'd have thought you'd be focused on more important things than playing house with a pet. The words stung more than they should have. At 45, I'd expected to be past caring about my parents' approval, yet here I was, feeling like a disappointed child again. I looked around the table at their disapproving faces, feeling a familiar disappointment settle in my chest. Nothing had changed. I was still the odd one out in this family, and now Max was too. We should get going, I said, standing up abruptly. I have some work to finish before Monday. As I drove home with Max sitting calmly in the passenger seat, I realized something had shifted. For years, I tried to please my parents, to fit into their expectations, but now with my own home and Max by my side, I finally had the freedom to live on my own terms. Just you and me, Max, I said, reaching over to scratch behind his ears, my voice steadier than I felt. And honestly, that's all I need. Growing family distance. Over the next few months, my visits to my parents' house became less frequent. When I did go, it was only when my colleague Samantha could watch Max for a few hours. Every time, the conversation inevitably turned to Jessica, her career prospects, her plans, her dreams. It was always the same script, with me playing the role of supportive older sister while feeling increasingly disconnected from my family. During one such visit, Jessica pushed past me in the hallway, her face pinched with frustration. Interview fell through, she muttered. Manager said maybe next quarter. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely, recognizing the genuine disappointment beneath her indifference. These things happen. There'll be other opportunities. She leaned against the wall, her eyes drifting to my car keys in my hand. You're leaving already? You just got here. I need to get back to Max. Samantha has plans tonight. I glanced at my watch, conscious of the time I'd promised. Jessica scoffed. That dog. You act like it's your child or something. He's family to me, I said simply, the words coming out with a certainty that surprised even me. She shook her head, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. You're lucky, you know that? Your own place, making your own rules. Must be nice. I felt a flicker of frustration. It's not luck, Jessica. It's 15 years of saving, planning, and working hard at a job that wasn't always glamorous. The words hung between us, unacknowledged truths neither of us was ready to fully confront. Life settled into a comfortable routine with Max. Morning walks through the neighborhood where I'd greet the same early risers each day. Work at the advertising agency where I'd recently been tasked with mentoring junior staff, and Max's excited greeting when I returned home, his whole body wiggling with joy as if I'd been gone for years instead of hours. Our weekends were filled with dog park visits where Max was gradually becoming more confident around other dogs, and lazy evenings together on the couch, my fingers absently stroking his soft fur while I reviewed campaign materials. Then, on a Tuesday that had started like any other, my boss called me into her office. Elizabeth was in her mid-50s, a sharp-minded woman who'd broken through the agency's glass ceiling years before and had always been fair in her assessments of my work. "Carol, I have an opportunity for you," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose as she watched me scan the contents. "We're opening a new branch in Colorado, and we need someone to go set it up. 3 months on site to train the new team." I flipped through the details. The assignment looked challenging but exciting, exactly the kind of project I'd been hoping for. "This would be a significant step up in your career path," she continued. "If you handle this well, we're looking at a VP position when you return. The board has specifically requested you based on how you handled the Westfield account last year." I felt a surge of pride at the recognition, quickly followed by concern as Max's face flashed in my mind. "I need to figure out a few things, but I want this opportunity," I told Elizabeth. "Can I give you a definite answer tomorrow?" She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Of course. Talk it through with your family. Check your arrangements. I know it's a big ask." That evening, I researched pet hotels and professional pet sitting services, but the thought of Max staying in a kennel for 3 months broke my heart. He'd already been in a shelter, already felt abandoned once. I couldn't bear the thought of him feeling that way again, especially after we'd worked so hard to build his trust. "What are we going to do, buddy?" I asked him as he rested his head on my lap, those soulful brown eyes looking up at me with complete trust. The responsibility of that trust weighed heavily on me, yet I knew this Colorado opportunity could be career-defining. The unexpected proposition. The next day, there was a knock at my door. Jessica stood in the hallway, shifting uncomfortably. "Mom said you weren't answering her calls, so she sent me to check on you." She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes scanning my living room with barely disguised curiosity. Max trotted over to greet her, and she absent-mindedly pushed him away when he tried to sniff her hand. "Why are there suitcases out?" she asked, pointing to the luggage I'd pulled from storage. "Planning a getaway without telling the family?" I sighed, closing the door behind her. "It's work, not vacation. They want me to head up the opening of our new branch in Colorado. 3 months on site." I watched her eyes light up with interest as I mentioned the potential promotion. "Vice president? Wow, that's a big deal. So, what's the problem?" "Sounds like an amazing opportunity," she said, flopping down on my couch and picking up a throw pillow to examine it. "It's Max. I don't know where he'll stay while I'm gone." I gestured to my dog, who had retreated to his bed in the corner, watching Jessica warily. "The kennels I've checked are either booked or I just can't put him in that environment for 3 months. Not after what he's been through." Jessica looked at Max, who was curled up in his plush bed, his eyes still following her movements. Something shifted in her expression. "I could watch him," she offered suddenly. I stared at her, not sure I'd heard correctly. "You? But you don't even like dogs." She shrugged, running her fingers along the edge of my coffee table. "I could stay here in your house. It would give me a break from mom and dad, and you wouldn't have to put him in some kennel. Plus, your place is closer to all the good bars and restaurants than the suburbs." I hesitated, studying my sister's face. Something didn't feel right about this sudden change of heart, but I was running out of options and time. Elizabeth needed my answer tomorrow. "There would be rules," I said firmly. "No parties, keep the place clean. Max needs 2 walks a day, morning and evening. His food is measured out. I'll show you exactly how much. And he takes medication for his joints in the morning with breakfast." Got it, got it," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "I'm not a child, Carol. I'm 38. I can handle looking after a house and a dog." I wanted to point out that she still lived with our parents and hadn't held a steady job in years, but I bit my tongue. This wasn't the time for another sibling argument, and I desperately needed this solution to work. "There's an emergency fund for vet bills in the kitchen drawer, and I'll leave my vet's contact information on the fridge," I continued, already mentally organizing what Jessica would need to know. It'll be fine, she assured me, her tone softening slightly. Look, I know we're not always on the best terms, but I can do this for you. You've always been the responsible one. Maybe it's time I stepped up too. The sentiment surprised me, and for a moment, I allowed myself to hope that this arrangement might actually bring us closer. The day of my departure arrived too quickly. Jessica showed up with two large suitcases, looking more like she was moving in permanently than pet sitting. She brought in several shopping bags as well, filled with what looked like new clothes and makeup. Remember, Max's dinner is at 6, and he gets these dental treats before bed, I explained as I waited for my taxi. I knelt down beside Max, who seemed to sense something was happening. His eyes darted between Jessica and me anxiously. And please, no parties. The neighbors are mostly older people who value their quiet. Everything will be fine, Jessica said, pushing me toward the door. Go be successful. Bring back that VP title. Max and I will have a great time. I knelt down to hug Max, feeling a lump in my throat. Be a good boy. I'll miss you so much. I pressed my face into his fur, inhaling his familiar scent, trying to memorize the feeling of his solid warmth against me. The taxi honked outside. I gave Max one last pat, shot Jessica a warning look, and left, already counting the days until I'd be back. Life in Colorado. The first week in Colorado was a whirlwind of meetings, setting up systems for the new office, and working long hours to establish a positive team culture. The mountainous landscape outside my hotel window was breathtaking, but I barely had time to appreciate it. Every night, I texted Jessica for updates on Max. She always replied with brief messages. All good here, or Max is fine, stop worrying. Occasionally, I managed to video call her, and seeing Max's face on screen, hearing his excited bark when he recognized my voice, eased my anxiety. Is he eating okay? Taking his medicine? I'd ask, trying to catch glimpses of my house in the background of the video. Yes, Carol, he's perfectly fine. You're more anxious than he is, Jessica would reply, often tilting the camera away before I could see too much of the surroundings. By the third week, I'd settled into a routine. The new team was enthusiastic, and I found myself enjoying the challenge. My predecessor had left things in disarray, but I was making significant progress reorganizing the department and establishing clearer workflows. Elizabeth called regularly for updates, always sounding pleased with my reports. You're proving the board right about you, she told me during one call. Keep this up, and that VP position is a certainty. Jessica's updates continued, always positive, always brief. Something about their uniformity began to nag at me, but I pushed the concern aside. I had enough to focus on with the project. Then, late one evening, as I was reviewing budget projections in my hotel room, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Clark, my elderly neighbor from the house next door. Carol dear, I hate to bother you, she began, her voice tight with annoyance. But there's been quite a disturbance from your house these past few nights. Loud music, many people coming and going at all hours, and I'm concerned about your dog. He's been barking and crying a lot. It doesn't sound like he's happy. My stomach dropped. How long has this been going on? Well, the first week was quiet enough, Mrs. Clark replied. But this past week, almost every night there's been parties. And I haven't seen your sister walking the dog in days. I used to see her in the mornings, but not anymore. After thanking Mrs. Clark, I immediately called Jessica. She answered on the fourth ring, music pulsing in the background and what sounded like multiple conversations happening around her. Hello? She shouted over the noise. Jessica, what's going on? Turn down the music. We need to talk. I could hear the anger in my voice, barely controlled. There was movement, and the music grew fainter. What's up? It's kind of late here, she said, her words slightly slurred. I just got a call from my neighbor. She says you've been throwing parties and Max is upset. She hasn't seen you walking him either. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Your neighbor is exaggerating, Jessica scoffed. We had a couple of friends over, that's all. And Max is fine. I took him out this morning. Show me the house, I demanded. Right now. Video call. The call switched to video. Red plastic cups littered my coffee table. There were people visible in the background, perhaps a dozen, lounging on my furniture, drinks in hand. The living room was a disaster zone: empty bottles, food containers, and what looked like cigarette burns on my side table. "Where's Max?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. The camera panned to show Max huddled in the corner of the kitchen, looking anxious. He was pressed against the wall, his tail tucked between his legs, his eyes wide with stress. The sight of him looking so frightened in his own home sent a wave of rage through me. "Get everyone out now and take Max for a walk, a proper one," I ordered, fighting to keep my voice level. "Then we're going to have a serious conversation." She rolled her eyes but nodded. "Fine. Everything will be back to normal tomorrow. Stop overreacting." I hung up and immediately called my parents, hoping they might talk sense into Jessica. But as soon as I explained the situation, I realized my mistake. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill, Carol," my mother said dismissively. "Jessica's just enjoying a little freedom from us for once. Young people need to socialize." "She's 38, not 18, I insisted, pacing my hotel room. "She promised to take care of Max, and she's breaking that promise. He's frightened and probably not getting walked or fed properly." "It's just a dog," Dad chimed in. "And frankly, you've always been too uptight. No wonder you're divorced." "Jessica's right. You need to lighten up." The comparison stung. "Could you at least check on her? Make sure she's keeping the place decent." "You're being controlling," Mom said. "Jessica will be fine. Don't call us with these petty complaints again." They hung up, leaving me seething with frustration and worry. I should have known better than to expect their support. As always, Jessica was the golden child who could do no wrong. Growing concerns. The days following my confrontation with Jessica blurred together. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the constant worry about Max in my apartment. Every morning, I checked my phone for Jessica's daily text, always some version of "everything's fine," and tried to believe her. "You seem distracted," Elizabeth commented after a meeting where I'd fumbled through a presentation. "Is everything all right with the new team?" "The team's great," I assured her, forcing a smile. "Just a little family issue back home." She studied me for a moment. "If you need to make adjustments to your schedule, let me know. Family comes first." I nodded, touched by her understanding, wondering if I should cut the trip short. But I'd worked too hard for this opportunity. Surely Max would be okay for another few weeks. Over the weekend, I tried calling Jessica for a video chat. I missed Max terribly and needed to see his face, to hear him bark with excitement when he recognized my voice. "Sorry, can't talk right now." Walking Max, read her text response to my call. I tried again that evening. Making dinner. Call tomorrow. Tomorrow came, and again excuses. By Monday, I was getting suspicious. This pattern continued for days. Whenever I tried to see Max on video, Jessica always had a reason why she couldn't show him. "Send me a picture of him," I texted her directly, no longer hiding my frustration. Hours later, a photo arrived. Max lounging on my couch, looking happy and relaxed. I felt a momentary relief until I took a closer look at the image. The light coming through the window suggested early morning, not evening when she sent it. I scrolled back through my text history, finding earlier photos she'd sent. There it was, the exact same image, sent 3 weeks earlier. She was recycling old photos. My heart raced as panic set in. Why would she send old pictures unless something was wrong with Max? With shaking hands, I dialed Mrs. Clark's number. "Hello, Carol," she answered, sounding less irritated than during our last conversation. "Hi, Mrs. Clark. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to ask about my dog. Have you seen Max recently? Heard him barking?" There was a pause that made my blood run cold. "Now that you mention it, I haven't heard your dog in at least 2 weeks. The parties have continued, though they're quieter now, but no barking, no dog sounds at all." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing with terrible possibilities. Where was Max? What had Jessica done? I immediately texted my sister. "I need to see Max. Video call now." The message showed as read, but no response came. I called again, straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Jessica, I know you're lying about the photos. Call me back immediately and show me Max, or I swear I'll call the police and report him stolen. Hours passed with no response. I couldn't concentrate on work, couldn't eat, couldn't think about anything except Max. The night passed in a sleepless blur as I checked my phone every few minutes hoping for a response that never came. By morning, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I called Elizabeth, my fingers trembling as I dialed. Elizabeth speaking, she answered on the second ring. It's Carol. I need to go home, I blurted out. It's an emergency. Carol, what's wrong? My boss sounded concerned. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, though I could hear my voice cracking. I think something's happened to my dog. My sister won't answer my calls, and my neighbor hasn't seen or heard him in weeks. I understand you're worried, but we're in the middle of this project. Could you wait until the weekend? She suggested gently. I shook my head even though she couldn't see me, tears threatening to spill. I know this project is important for my career. I know I'm risking my promotion, but Max is family to me, and I can't sit here doing spreadsheets when he might be. I couldn't finish the sentence. There was a long pause on the other end, then a sigh. I had a dog growing up. Rusty. If I were in your shoes, I'd do the same thing. Another pause. Go. You've already accomplished most of what we needed anyway. We can handle the rest. The return. I booked the first flight I could find, packed my bags in a frenzy, and headed to the airport. By the time my plane landed, it was nearly midnight. I took a taxi straight to my house, rehearsing what I would say to Jessica. The fury that had been building inside me for the past 24 hours had crystallized into something cold and hard. As the taxi pulled up to my building, I could hear music from my house. Great, another party. I paid the driver, grabbed my suitcase, and marched up the walkway. The music grew louder as I approached my door. The scene that greeted me was exactly what I'd expected. About a dozen people sprawled across my living room drinking from red cups. My furniture pushed against the walls to make space for dancing, the air reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. I dropped my suitcase with a thud, walked to the speaker system, and yanked the plug from the wall. The sudden silence made everyone freeze and turn toward me. Party's over, I announced, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me. Everyone out now. There were confused murmurs, but something in my expression must have conveyed that I wasn't to be argued with. People began gathering their things, filing past me with awkward apologies and averted gazes. Jessica emerged from the kitchen, her face registering shock when she saw me. Carol, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Colorado. Where's Max? I demanded, ignoring her question. My eyes scanned the room, searching for any sign of my dog. She glanced around nervously as the last of her guests left. He's not here right now. I can see that, I said, stepping closer to her. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Where is he, Jessica? Something in her expression changed. A flicker of vindictiveness crossed her face. Fine, you want to know where your precious dog is? I got tired of him. He wouldn't stop barking whenever we had people over. He was ruining all my fun. My heart dropped. What did you do? I took him to a shelter, she said, her voice cold. He was a pain in the ass anyway. Always needing walks and special food and those stupid medications. I have better things to do. The world seemed to stop. I stared at my sister, this person I'd grown up with, now a complete stranger to me. In that moment, I hated her with an intensity that frightened me. Get out, I whispered. Pack your things and get out right now, or I swear I'll do something we'll both regret. You can't kick me out, she protested, but her voice wavered. Where am I supposed to go? Back to Mom and Dad. To a hotel. I don't care. My voice was ice. You have 15 minutes to get your stuff and leave. After everything I've done for you, all the times I've covered for you, loaned you money, listened to your problems. And this is how you repay me? By abandoning my dog at a shelter? She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. Something in my expression must have told her this wasn't a battle she could win. Silently, She went to the guest room and began packing. The moment she was gone, I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion and fear washing over me. Max was in a shelter somewhere, but which one? There were at least a dozen in the city. I pulled myself together and grabbed my phone. It was past midnight, far too late to call any shelters, but I could email them. I drafted a quick message describing Max. Golden Retriever, male, 7 years old, microchipped with my contact information, and sent it to every shelter I could find online. Sleep was impossible. I spent the night cleaning up the mess from Jessica's parties and trying not to cry every time I came across one of Max's toys. His bed in the corner of my bedroom was empty, his leash hanging untouched by the door. By morning, I was running on coffee and anxiety. I started calling shelters the moment they opened. The first four had no record of a dog matching Max's description. The fifth call changed everything. Yes, we did have a lab mix brought in about 2 weeks ago, the woman on the phone confirmed. Female said it was a stray she'd found, but he had a microchip. We've been trying to contact the owner, but the phone number listed goes straight to voicemail. My old number. I changed it a year ago and updated it everywhere except apparently Max's microchip registry. That's my dog, I said, my voice breaking. His name is Max. I'm Carol Weber. I can come right now with proof of ownership. We close at 5, the woman said kindly. We'll be waiting for you. I thanked her profusely, grabbed my purse and car keys, and rushed out the door. The shelter was on the other side of town, a 30-minute drive that felt like hours. All I could think about was Max, scared, confused, wondering why I'd abandoned him. The reunion, when I arrived, I practically ran to the front desk, identification and adoption papers in hand. The staff verified my information and led me to the kennel area. And there he was, curled up in the corner of a cage looking smaller somehow. His golden coat had lost some of its shine, and he didn't immediately look up when we approached. Max, I called softly. His head snapped up, ears perking. The moment of recognition, his eyes locking with mine, will stay with me forever. He jumped to his feet, tail wagging so hard his whole body shook, and let out a joyful bark that echoed through the shelter. The staff member opened the cage, and Max bounded into my arms, licking my face, whimpering with happiness. I hugged him tightly, tears streaming down my face, whispering apologies he couldn't understand, but somehow seemed to forgive anyway. I'm so sorry, boy. I'm so sorry I left you with her. My voice broke as I held him, feeling his ribs more prominently than before. I'll never leave you again. After completing the necessary paperwork to reclaim him, we walked out of the shelter together. Max stayed pressed against my leg the entire drive home as if afraid I might disappear again if he lost contact. I kept one hand on him, reassuring us both of our connection. Back at the house, I gave him a thorough bath, checked him for any health issues, finding him thinner but otherwise okay, and fed him his favorite food. That night, he slept in my bed, something I'd never allowed before, but rules seemed less important now than keeping him close. He curled against me, his warm weight a comforting presence I hadn't realized how desperately I'd missed. The confrontation. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my mother. Carol, we need to talk about what happened with Jessica. She began without preamble. She's very upset. She's upset? I laughed incredulously, my free hand resting on Max's head as he sat beside me at the kitchen table. She abandoned my dog at a shelter and trashed my house. Don't be so dramatic. It was just a dog, and she was only having a little fun with her friends, my mother said dismissively. You need to apologize for throwing her out with nowhere to go. Beside me, Max rested his head on my lap, looking up with those trusting brown eyes that had kept him waiting for me at the shelter. This was the final straw. No, I said firmly. I'm not apologizing. Max is family to me, even if you don't understand that. And until Jessica takes responsibility for what she did, and until you and Dad stop making excuses for her, I don't want to hear from any of you. Carol Elizabeth Weber. My mother gasped. You don't mean that. You choose a dog over your own family? I'm choosing to surround myself with beings who respect me and who I can trust, I replied, surprising myself with my calmness. Right now, that's not you, Dad, or Jessica. I need some time and space, Mom. Please respect that. Well, she huffed, clearly not expecting this level of resistance from me. When you come to your senses, you know where to find us. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up before she could respond, my heart racing but my mind clearer than it had been in years. For so long I tried to meet my family's expectations, to be the daughter they wanted. But in that moment, I decided to be the person I needed to be for myself and for Max. The following weeks weren't easy. My parents and Jessica called and texted repeatedly, alternating between guilt trips and angry accusations. I blocked their numbers. I needed space to heal, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, not just between Max and me, but my trust in my own judgment. New beginnings. Work was a welcome distraction. Elizabeth was understanding about my early return, and though I hadn't completed the full 3 months in Colorado, she was impressed with what I'd accomplished in the time I was there. The team speaks very highly of the systems you put in place, she told me during my first day back. And the retention strategy you developed has already shown promising results. The promotion we discussed came through, bringing with it a welcome salary increase that I immediately put toward a doggy daycare service for the days I couldn't work from home. I found a place that specialized in dogs with anxiety issues, where the staff sent me daily updates and photos. Life settled into a new rhythm. One Saturday morning while at the dog park, Max made friends with a German shepherd named Luna. As Max and Luna played, I struck up a conversation with Luna's owner, Richard. He was in his early 50s, with kind eyes and an easy smile, dressed in casual clothes that couldn't quite hide what I suspected was a very fit physique. Your retriever seems much more confident with other dogs than when you first started coming here, he observed, watching the two dogs chase each other. You've noticed us before? I asked, surprised. He smiled sheepishly. I'm a veterinarian. Professional habit. I notice all the dogs and their humans. He extended his hand. Richard Bennett. Carol Weber, I replied, shaking his hand. And that's Max. We've been working on his confidence. He had a bit of a rough time recently. He seems to be bouncing back well, Richard said. Good nutrition and lots of love work wonders. We exchanged numbers before leaving the park, and soon regular dog park meetups turned into coffee dates, then dinner dates. Richard was easy to be with, kind, thoughtful, and he adored Max almost as much as I did. I learned he'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier and had thrown himself into his work until recently. Grief is a strange companion, he told me one evening as we walked our dogs along the riverfront. It never really leaves, but it changes shape over time. I found myself opening up to him about my family situation, something I rarely discussed with anyone. He listened without judgment, understanding in a way few people did. 6 months after the shelter incident, I received a letter from Jessica. It was an apology, not perfect, still with traces of justification, but sincere enough that I could see she'd done some reflecting. I've started therapy, she wrote. I'm trying to understand why I do the things I do, why I've always been so jealous of you and your life. I know I hurt you and Max, and I'm truly sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I understand what I did was wrong. I didn't respond immediately. I needed time to process, to decide if I wanted to let her back into my life in any capacity. That decision didn't need to be rushed. As I sat on my porch that evening, watching Max and Richard play fetch in the backyard, I realized something profound. Sometimes the family we're born into isn't the family we need. Sometimes we have to create our own, built on trust, respect, and love rather than obligation and shared DNA. Max trotted over and laid his head on my lap, his brown eyes gazing up at me with complete trust restored. I scratched behind his ears just the way he liked. We did all right, didn't we, boy? I whispered. In response, Max let out a contented sigh and closed his eyes, perfectly at peace in the home we made together.